Operation Fall Rot, the final stab that finished France, 1940. Part 1. The intoxication of victory of Nazi Germany. After Operation Fall Gelb, the lightning assault like a steel storm sweeping through the Netherlands, Belgium, and the Ardennes forest, all of Germany entered a state that history rarely witnesses. The intoxication of victory of a nation that had just awakened after humiliation. In just 6 short weeks, the German army accomplished what no strategist in Europe dared to imagine, completely breaking France's defensive line, crushing the Anglo-French allied forces, the great powers that had once dominated the continent, forcing more than 300,000 allied soldiers to flee in chaos from Dunkirk, and leaving the entire West frozen in horror. This was no longer a simple victory. This was a thunderbolt striking the old order of Europe. For the Germans, this meant something deeper than war itself. It was a resurrection. 20 years earlier, Germany had been forced to kneel in humiliation after the First World War. The Treaty of Versailles had turned a mighty empire into a nation torn apart and disgraced. Territory was cut away, the army was disarmed, the economy was strangled by enormous reparations, and the entire nation was branded as the villain of Europe. In the memory of the Germans, Versailles was not merely a treaty. It was a wound, a humiliation burning quietly for 2 decades. But now, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, Germany did not simply rise again. They were crushing those who had once forced them to bow. Berlin blazed with cheers. The returning armies were hailed like heroes of ancient times. The German people believed they were witnessing the rebirth of an empire. And Hitler walked among his generals, his face calm to the point of coldness, as if everything was inevitable. He said firmly, "We have proven to the world that Germany will never submit." In Hitler's mind, this victory was not accidental. He believed it was a sign of destiny. He believed he was the chosen one to rewrite European history with steel and blood. But not everyone in the ranks of generals shared that belief. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, seasoned and experienced, whispered anxiously, "Victory too fast is sometimes the beginning of mistakes." Because he understood something Hitler did not want to admit. The intoxication of victory can blind men. But amid the cheers of the nation, amid the glory of triumph, no one could hear that warning anymore. Part 2. The gates of France were torn open. After Fall Gelb, the map of Western Europe changed color in the blink of an eye. All of the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and northern France fell into Nazi hands like chess pieces swept off the board of history. A proud power like France was suddenly thrown into shock. The most painful truth for the French was that they had placed absolute faith in a symbol that seemed unbreakable, the Maginot Line. For more than 20 years, France had poured into it the entire fortune of the nation. Concrete fortresses deep underground, massive artillery guns, tunnels stretching hundreds of kilometers, a system praised as the strongest in Europe. They believed, if the Germans return, they will be stopped forever. But history never follows belief. Germany did not attack Maginot head-on. They did not crash into the steel wall. They went around, they cut through the Ardennes, the forest the French thought tanks could never cross. And then they struck into France's back like a fatal knife. Maginot became a bitter symbol, a perfect fortress placed in the wrong position. While the smoke of Dunkirk had not yet cleared, Hitler stood before the map of Europe. His eyes did not stop in the north. He looked down toward southern France. Hitler understood clearly. The north had been torn apart. But France was not yet completely dead. The South still had a government. The French army still had forces. And if France recovered, the war would drag on. Hitler did not want it to drag on. He wanted to finish it. He wanted one final blow, one fatal stab, so that France would never rise again. A new plan was drawn up in smoke-filled rooms at German headquarters, an operation no longer of cunning, but of pure strength. That operation was called Fall Rot, the Red Operation. If Fall Gelb was the slash that opened the door, then Fall Rot would be the stab straight into the heart of France, and the wheel of history began to spin faster, rolling toward Paris, rolling toward the collapse of a power once considered the heart of Europe. Part 3. Fall Rot, the final stab. If Fall Gelb was the slash that tore open the gates of France, then Fall Rot was the fatal stab. After Dunkirk, the French army was only fragments. More than 60 exhausted divisions, disorganized, spirit shattered, no longer hoping for British reinforcements. Meanwhile, the German army remained almost intact. More than 140 divisions, 10 armored divisions, thousands of Luftwaffe aircraft, more than 2,000 panzer tanks. The Germans entered the battle with absolute confidence. The French entered it with despair. On the streets, millions of civilians fled. Columns of horse carts, bicycles, automobiles, packed with belongings, stretched endlessly toward the south. A civilized nation was dissolving before the eyes of the world. Hitler ordered, destroy all remaining French forces, march to Paris, do not let them have a chance to revive. The objective was no longer victory, it was termination. Part 4. 3 prongs that crushed France. Operation Fall Rot was launched with 3 massive assault axes. Army Group B, attacking from the Somme River straight toward Paris. Army Group A, driving southeast, cutting off every retreat route. Army Group C, pressing against Maginot, turning it into a gigantic trap. The German Air Force played the role of pathfinder, bombing cities, destroying bridges, shattering railways, paralyzing the rear. Hitler believed that in only a few weeks, France would collapse completely. And he was right. Part 5. June 5th. The Somme line collapses. At dawn on June 5th, 1940, thousands of German guns opened fire simultaneously. The sky trembled. Bombs from the Luftwaffe poured down like a storm. Then panzer tanks roared across the Somme River. The French line, expected to hold at least a week, collapsed within hours. The French no longer fought as an army. They fought only to survive. Units were cut apart, disintegrated, encircled, crushed beneath German steel tracks. Once again, Blitzkrieg proved defense without counterattack is only an illusion. Part 6. Paris falls. The symbol collapses. Hitler ordered, advance to Paris, no need to wait. On June 14, 1940, German tanks entered Paris. No resistance, no battle, only silent streets. The swastika flag was raised atop the Eiffel Tower. The glorious capital of Europe officially collapsed. In the east, dozens of French divisions still held inside Maginot. They believed it was the last hope. But the Germans had swung behind, cut off supplies. Maginot became a trap. More than 400,000 soldiers were isolated, unable to retreat, unable to fight. Only surrender remained. Part 7. France surrenders, Versailles is avenged. On June 17, Marshal Philippe Pétain became Prime Minister and declared on the radio, "The battle is over. We surrender." For the French, it was a bitter confession. For Hitler, it was absolute satisfaction. 22 years earlier, Germany had been forced to kneel at Versailles. Now, history reversed. Hitler chose Compiègne, where the 1918 armistice was signed, as the site of the new agreement. On June 22, 1940, in the very same railway carriage, France signed surrender to Germany. No negotiation, no protest, only humiliating silence. Part 8. France divided in two, the shadow of occupation. Under the armistice, northern France and the Atlantic coast were occupied by Germany. The south belonged to the Vichy government, a puppet regime under Berlin's shadow. Millions of French prisoners were sent to labor camps, Paris filled with German soldiers. Every step they took was a reminder. France had lost sovereignty on its own soil. But in the darkness, a flame still burned. Part 9. De Gaulle and the spirit of France is not dead. On June 18, 1940, from London, General Charles de Gaulle issued his call. The war of France is not over. Though this battle is lost, France has not died. From that moment, the French resistance was born. A new France formed silently, not by territory, but by spirit. The spirit that refuses submission. Part 10. Hitler looks to Britain, the illusion of omnipotence. The victory over France was a military earthquake. Europe nearly changed color from the Atlantic to Poland. Only one nation remained standing, Britain. Winston Churchill declared, "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender." Hitler looked across the English Channel. He believed Paris had fallen. Europe belonged to him. And next would be London. Operation Sea Lion began to take shape. But from here, Nazi Germany entered its most dangerous phase, the illusion of absolute power. History, like a double-edged sword, does not only punish the defeated, it also reflects the arrogance of the victors. Conclusion: Fall Rot ended in 17 days. A continental power collapsed, but the war was not over. Hitler had avenged Versailles, but his ambition did not stop at Paris. It pointed toward London, and farther still toward the east, where a war 100 times more brutal was waiting.